Yep. Yeah, you can fix whatever you want. Trust me, that's just me writing what's in my head. Doesn't mean it's correct. So what we're going to go over is kind of like everything in a nutshell in how it starts to pertain to our exercise selection, and then maybe how it kind of presents itself in some of the people we're seeing, right? So the first thing is we're just going to go through part of the new information and stuff in the file that I've sent you guys. So we're going to recap it with we have 2 planes, which we're always looking at. Erica, what are they? Erica? ER and IR, all right? So we have these 2 things that are going to govern pretty much everything we do because everything fits within that space. And then we have 2 kind of rib cage models, narrow and wide. All right, and then we have a bunch of iterations off of that stuff. So right now, right, with our narrow, we have a bias towards ER, which is more of a inhalation strategy, and we also associate that with, so it's external rotation, abduction, flexion, and plantar flexion, and supination. IR, wide ISA angle, associated more with exhalation or compression, which is internal rotation, adduction, extension, and dorsiflexion. All right, so all of these things kind of help decide what we're going to do, who we're looking at, maybe where they need more movement.
You said associated with,
yes.
Like when I think of a wide ISA,
yes.
You said compression.
Yep.
I think of being expanded when I have a wide
Okay.
ISA.
So the
Not
compressed. All right, so remember, the wide ISA has a inhalation compensatory strategy on top of it because it is so compressed.
So you're always trying to...
Because everything's, you are trying to inhale to open it back up.
Okay.
All right, and these are our compensatory strategies. So to Doug's point, right? If I have a narrow ISA rib cage, I have typically a inhaled axial skeleton. If I have a wide ISA, I have an exhaled axial skeleton. So the compensatory strategy, if I have an exhaled or compressed axial skeleton, is an inhalation bias. Right? So this is kind of the stuff that has kind of like been swirling around the past couple weeks that I was like, oh, I think this kind of sheds some light into some of the stuff we've been working on. All right? So if we have these 2 things, all right, does anybody know what a narrow is really good at? Are they good at kind of going down or producing force?
Going down.
Correct, right? So if I have a narrow, I have someone that basically has so if I have a narrow ISA, I also have a narrow pubic angle, right? And the narrow pubic angle is going to make our pelvic floor descended a little bit. So everything, gut specifically, can drop down really easily, so they're going to be able to, they should technically be able to squat better, right? Because everything can just kind of go right to the floor. If I have a wide, same thing, I'm going to have more of a flattened out pubic angle and diaphragm, which means I have this more of like a trampoline effect, so they can produce force back up because the guts are going to hit that and go back up. But they lose range of motion in the process because I have this compression force overlaid on top of it. All right, so that's kind of like what we're going to be digging into a lot today is how do we kind of view these things and put them all together when we look at like our assessments and our exercise choices, and then we'll get into some turning and how that starts to look and what we can start to do because that's kind of the last thing I think that is the point where sometimes when we look at someone like Brandon, right, or even Doug, who's a wider ISA that has these compression forces, and we're like, all right, why isn't this stuff necessarily working? We need to kind of understand that there's compression on both sides of stuff, and that we have to like slowly start to peel back layers. Whereas narrows, it's kind of like, good, give them some heavy weights and start lifting hard. All right, so we're gonna go through your assessment. Brandon's gonna do it.
Is this one of our new employees?
Yes, it is.
This is Rob.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and lay down for me.
Brandon, you want a sheet?
That would help.
Okay. You got it? All right, so first, Rob, give us a quick injury history.
3 hernias, all 3 operated on the fixed. And just current pain,
Sure.
just bad shoulder.
Right shoulder.
Yeah.
What caused the hernias?
Lifting.
Okay. Okay. And how recent were those?
The surgery was this August will be 2 years.
Okay. All right, and does it still give you any discomfort? Excuse me.
There's a little scar tissue in there, but other than that, no.
Cool. All right, no feet, ankle, knee, hips.
My right knee is pretty bad too.
In what way?
Just hurts. I have no idea what's wrong with it.
Okay. And then I know. And then low back.
Good.
Okay. And then elbows and wrists and neck and everything.
Yep. All good.
Oh, good. All right. So we got right knee, right shoulder, hernias. All right. Go for it.
Pain, discomfort. Nope.
So the other thing too is I've been trying to be a little bit more precise with my measurements. So go ahead, Brand, do that again, and watch his right or his left leg. Yeah, right. You can start to see it drag, right? And that's the thing is like a lot of times like I was kind of like pushing in to see if they can actually compress that joint and are they able to tolerate it. But I was also pushing the whole pelvis with it and then rolling it to like one side or the other, which is like, oh wow, this person's got a ton of hip flexion. And in reality, I was like, not really, right?
So when we're doing hip flexion, we're looking to see as soon as that leg kind of.
Do it again, and we'll probably.
Like slightly dragged.
Yeah. So right about there, right? It's
Right about there.
yeah, and that's still pretty good. I would say it's still close to almost like what 110, maybe 115 degrees. All right. So give him a little bit more pressure. And that's where you start to see the whole thing get dragged, right? And that's him telling us like the whole pelvis is now rolling back with it. All right, so that's good. So I'd still say it's pretty good. No pain, right? You want some pain?
Any pain, discomfort? Nope. Right about there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little tough.
What gave it away? I know. I was gonna say like, Rob, do you stick your finger in a socket or something? Jesus. All right, so we definitely have a loss of IR, and it doesn't feel good, right? Okay.
Active straight leg. Can I have you raise this leg up as straight as you can? Straight leg, yeah.
All right, so Rob, do me a favor. Just bring it back down. Keep that toe facing the ceiling. Yeah, and go right back up again. All right, so anybody see right away like how he turned his foot out? What would that indicate? What is he trying to do? He's trying to externally rotate to create more space to bring it up. All right, so I would still like he started it still was pretty good. It wasn't horrible, but if we're looking at like what's he trying to do like at that end range, he's trying to create a lot of movement out of that space.
Would that be a minus?
Let me see you do it again, Rob. I would give him okay, yeah. I mean, it's just interesting as to how it starts to turn. Right? And there's no pain with that, right? All right. All right, so how does that one feel? Do them again, Brent. Yeah. So it starts to pop up a little bit, but would you say that's probably easier than the other side?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? And I would agree with that. So he's definitely got more flexion on the left. If we're looking at hip flexion, what it's kind of telling us is do we have enough space in the front to pull the femur up and back? And also, can I expand on this posterior side, basically kind of above the hips?
You okay?
Stretching my glute out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot more on this.
A lot more on the left, yeah.
Like a huge difference.
All right. And we're still missing some
Yeah.
degrees of, but yeah, the other side, yeah. So if we're looking at his injury history order in our head, where is he getting his internal rotation on his right side? Give me a different context.
So
Like, what do you
my
mean?
left leg
Yes.
is my dominant leg.
Okay.
I kick with it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if.
Are you right-handed?
What's that?
Are you right-handed?
Yeah.
All right. So that's kind of screwy, right? Like somewhere along the lines. No, but I mean, like, it's not. You can't say like, oh, well, I'm left-handed, I'm left leg. So the only time this stuff would really come into play is if your guts were like flip-flop, right? So if my liver was over here instead, like everything was switched, then you will typically see a more bias to the left side. So just because you kick more with your left leg, you're probably still right dominant. You're just like somehow were able to become a. Well, I'll give you an example of this, right? I eat, shave, and brush my teeth left-handed. I don't know why. It's the dumbest thing on the planet, but like you would think with a razor, I'd be like, I'll use my dominant hand, but nope, left-handed all day. So some of that stuff, the only thing that would come into play is like, all right, you get some repetitions on that left leg a little bit more than sometimes in the others. Right? So right knee pain, he doesn't have hip internal rotation at the right hip. We saw that foot trying to turn to go too. Most likely he's going to get his internal rotation actually at his knee joint. Right, because that's probably where it's coming from. If I can't do it at the hip and the hip is painful, and I still need to produce force down into the floor, and especially if my foot wants to turn a little bit, I'm probably going to get some type of force production at that knee joint. Right? You didn't like get hit by a car and your knee joint is messed up, right?
No, it's just from like softball.
Okay. All right. A little bit better. Good. All right, but still good. Anybody want to wager a guess what his infrasternal angle might be? I think we're all gonna go with wide. Yeah, I agree. So let's try his shoulders and see what he got. But if he is a wide, what should he have better access to? IR. Okay, so we should be. Yeah. So again, don't push it. Right. You should see the thing just kind of flop down.
So if he's wide, he should then have better.
IR. He's more biased to IR. Brand, bring his elbow up a little bit high. Yeah, there you go. A little different, right? Yeah, and that's what I would expect. So he's missing a little bit of ER and missing a good amount of IR. So this kind of goes to Doug's talk about earlier in terms of wides. Do I have a better picture? This might be a good picture. So if I have compression up here, and I have compression pushing on the sternum, right, front to back, where's the only place for air to go? Out the sides. That's why it blows the rib cage out to the side. That's why you get the wide ISAs, right? And if I have, remember, if we're looking for, I need space in order for the joint to turn into. So if I'm looking at this shoulder joint at that rib cage, if this pump handle, so you can see on the, this is not the case, but let's say this guy's more narrow, right? So if this pump handle's pulled down a little bit and my ribs are closed off, I don't really have a lot of room in the front because the chest can't expand and come up. So my IR should be at a deficit, right? Because there's just no place for it to turn into. I should have more ER because I've got this expansive upper back that can actually spin backwards, right? But in the case of a wide, because I've got everything smushed front to back, it's going to get pushed out. We're usually going to lose range of motion pretty quickly, but I should still be more biased towards internal rotation. All right? Yeah. Oh, great. Just creeping out Denise, you know. This is the normal staff meeting. All right. Real quick, point to where his ribs are.
Bottom of the ribs right here.
All right. And then you got a ton of space underneath. So what's his rib cage actually doing? Yeah, dude, it's tilting way back. Yeah, so you got to get that. So, hey, don't break his rib, but you got to kind of you got to bring him down a little bit. Yeah. Brandon just puts his knee up on his chest, like, all right. So if you bring it down, like so, right, give me a good exhale out. Good, now hold that there. Now go back with that. right? You see it's starting to turn probably
Yep.
even higher, like up around
Right
there.
around
All right. That's the other thing too we got to be careful of is if I have a pelvis, right, and then a rib cage, and this rib cage is tilted backwards. You see how much more space now I can. So if normally my shoulder goes this way, now it looks like it's going to go that way. So now it gives me more of this arc that feels like, oh no, they've got good overhead flexion. When in reality, they've just tilted this whole rib cage up, which now points their shoulder flexion almost down into the floor. All right. So that would be again, this our first thing is like, yes, he's got a rib cage that's probably tilting backwards. He's got a lot of compression on the backside, pushing this forward. We're losing some internal rotation on both hips on the front. We definitely lost some internal rotation on both shoulders on the front. Oh, we haven't checked the other side, but we've definitely got someone that's smushed. Okay? All right, so try the other side.
Well, I didn't do the.
Oh, do the adduction one.
I'm always bad at that one.
So you gotta be careful that you bring him across the front because it's easy. So if I take his elbow, so relax your arm. Yeah. Right. If I take his elbow and I just do this,
You can get it all done.
yeah, because I just kind of did that. But if I keep his shoulder down and then I come across, that's about it.
Okay.
All right. And what do you feel there? You don't get any pinching in the front or anything like that. No, but it didn't really come that far either. So we know we don't have really any posterior expansion on the scapular kind of level.
Okay.
So I was going to say, so is that usually the scalp issue or chest, like front, or could it be both?
Could be both. Well, we'll let Brandon run his measurements and then we'll talk about it in a second. That one easier than the other side? Or about the same?
Feels easier.
All right.
This was the shoulder
So-
you said was bothering him.
Yeah.
Does it hurt at all?
So bring that elbow up just a little bit. There you go. Yeah, and now go for it. Yeah, that's what I would expect. Yeah.
Do we need to have him exhale so that he doesn't have as much lordosis
So-
with this particular assessment, or
Only it's just telling you, like you don't want
He's
to
already
like this.
He's already
Come back.
He's already got a little more,
More
this
than
way
space.
anyway.
So this is
He
where.
would also
So
if you brought him back down, he would have a little more.
so here's what it kind of tells us, right? Is we already know that he's gonna have a loss of ER, and he's trying any way he can get it, whether it's turning his foot out or he's kind of coming back like this. So, the big thing is like you want to be aware, right? Because what you shouldn't typically see on someone like him is really good overhead flexion, right? If everything else is like tight as, like compressed as it can be, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this thing goes actually to the floor. Like something's not right. Like we're missing something. And that's where, all right, let's look at the rib cage and see if it's actually tilted backwards. Right, and the other two is like maybe he can't do it, right? So now we're already trying to put it. Yeah, I'd say it's about it. Yep. So I'm going to call you Brandon too.
He's got more pluses than me.
That's good. Yeah, you're right. Correct. Sorry. Sorry.
Left leg is much better.
One quadrant just surpasses all Brandon's measurements.
So right here and then.
Yep, and just bring him across. Yeah, and that's probably that. You got any pinching there? Yeah. Which we would expect, right? Again, we're looking for this internal rotation moment of adduction, and poof, just runs into it, doesn't like it. So we've got obviously. So the thing that helps me is if I'm seeing pain someplace, and as long as it wasn't a car accident or something like a traumatic event, what you're typically looking at is they're trying to get internal rotation at that point or at that joint or wherever it is. So it made me think back, like when I herniated the disc in my back, my hips were locked up from playing soccer. Like I probably had like the same thing as Brandon. I was like, zoot, zoot, and that was about it. And what was happening is my force production is going through right here. So every time I went to push into the ground, hard pushing, and I would extend my back, not my hip, or do anything else, and it just beat the crap out of the joint the whole time. All right, so that's something you kind of start to think about is like, all right, if someone comes in and like, man, my knee really hurts, right, and they're missing hip IR, or they're missing maybe maybe we'll get to the feet in a second, but maybe they're stuck in late propulsion or mid propulsion, something like that. And you then look at the knee, it's like, all right, I can kind of see where they're probably getting the force into the ground. It's probably in that one spot. So if we give them back something along that chain, it should alleviate that space a little bit. All right, and that's where maybe we pick a certain exercise that promotes some of those things. Okay, infrasternal angle, right?
Well, we didn't do it hip abdomen.
Okay, well, let's go ISA first, and then you flip them on his side.
Point to the bottom of your ribcage.
Don't tickle him.
Big breath. Exhale.
All right, do one more.
Exhale.
So what do you think?
Definitely wide.
Okay.
It's not moving it unless I'm like kind of, it's not really moving unless I kind of help
Guide it.
guide it.
All right. It looked like your hands were moving up and down a little bit.
Well, on that first one,
Yeah.
I kind of like pushed the, not push, he's getting all the air out.
Yeah, here we go.
All right, so come here and look at this, because this is a really good, easy representation of like a wide, right? You can see on my thumbs, basically they're like this at the top, whereas narrows, you're almost going to always see that, all right? So then if I just hang out there, go give me a breath in. Yeah. And blow it out. They don't really close actually that much. They drop down, but they don't really.
I helped him get,
You helped him.
Yeah, right?
he's sweating, he was like,
So what? No. So this is exactly what Doug was talking about, right? Because he's so compressed, he's superimposed this inhalation strategy on top to keep expanding to get air in. The only thing though is he can't close it off, right? So he can't get a full exhale, and that's what you're finding is you're seeing this rib cage go up, and then it just kind of comes down, but it never actually closes.
so on that first one, I kind of helped guide it.
Yeah,
Get to that
yeah, don't do that. Well, it's gonna give you a false sense because like the first thing then is like, what's the first thing we've got to restore in him? He's got to get a full exhale. We got to figure out how to get him all that air out because no matter what we pick after that, if he doesn't do that, we're probably gonna run interference every time he takes a breath in.
So didn't we do this before when they had their arms up and then
Yeah.
lean them back? So
He-
does that make a difference?
So you can do that, right? We already know he's already in that spot. Like I would say usually you want to find that point where all of a sudden you feel this just kind of get a little bit of movement, and then like, all right, and then show me what you can do. So I wouldn't expect really that much different from him though. Go ahead, show us the abduction and adduction.
onto your hip.
He's got two of them, so
I know.
Well, it's funny because you're right. Like
read Brandon's mind.
what's always crazy is like I sometimes forget that like people don't know, and especially if they're coming in like and they're a little nervous, and I'm like, oh, can you do this? And they're like, you know, I got to be confident with how I say it because otherwise they're gonna be like, oh, what did you mean me to do? I'm like, all right.
Oh, knee in the hip.
Let go. It's like, Brandon's touching.
You think this is weird? Wait till the end of the assessment. So, yeah, I'm sure it doesn't. I'm sure it's like a surfboard, but something that we can look at, right? Yeah, make it come.
It works.
You guys see all these wrinkles in his shirt, right? So that means he's getting some type of extension. So when you're pulling that femur back, he's already arching. He's already getting his back to arch to kind of give you the sense like, oh, I should go back. Right there, he's already failed extension and adduction.
Okay.
All right, so try abduction, see what you got. All right, and I can tell you right now, so like for someone his size, yeah, you need to really get underneath there because if you want to actually lift his leg to where you want it to go. So here, watch out, let me show you real quick. All right, so relax. Right. So I'm going to take his leg. I'm going to make sure this hip doesn't roll back, and as soon yeah, right about there, I can start to see that come back. I'm going to grab him here. Again, fix this hip. That's actually not too bad. Yeah, that actually wasn't too bad. Any pain in that? Good. Other side. right? So then knees come up. Good. Hold this guy. Give me this. So notice like he's got less wrinkles in the back of his shirt on this side, right? And it's a little bit, it still feels tight, and it still doesn't want to go anywhere. And then if I bring him here, this feels weird. So it wants to, I know. So it wants to go forward, right? So when I go to pull his leg up to the side, it wants to do this. And actually, did you just feel that in your knee a little bit? No. You know, like crepitus, like where you can feel like the knee, like that's what I'm feeling in his leg at the moment. All right. So, sorry. So I would put negatives for adduction, and I would actually put negatives for abduction too.
Okay.
But we've got a pretty good place to start. So now that we've got this, all right, we have a wide ISA. We've got a guy that's missing some range of motions. Let me take a look at this real quick.
Skip the box because I forgot which one.
That's okay. First off, he's not dynamic, right, for breathing. So that's the first thing we'd pick is how do we get him to get a full exhale, right? Hip flexion is good. Hip ER is like on the cusp. IR on both of them is no bueno, and there's pain in the right. Active straight leg raise is good. Isn't that kind of weird? Right? Like again, there's what we're trying to put together is this little pieces of the puzzle as to like, well, where is this actually coming from? But if I've got a pelvis, right?
You're saying that the active leg raise is weird?
Yes.
So if he's already arched,
Yep.
I guess he wouldn't have a posterior.
Nope.
Anterior.
Correct.
Yeah. So that would be
It should be like I would expect that to be tighter. Yes. I would expect it to be tighter. And what it could tell us is like, all right, well, maybe he's doing something weird to kind of like get it. All right, but I should have a sacrum, if I'm wide, that's nutated, right, which means it should be tilted up. If I have that, I have, actually this is a good representation, right? So you see how this is tilted up and back? You see how now this space is open more? He's going to be good at producing force because I've got that flattened out pelvic floor trampoline so that when he goes down and his guts go down with him, they're going to bounce right back up because there's a pressure coming back up because this thing is tight. Now on a narrow where the sacrum's a little more counternutated, this thing's a little bit more descended, right? And that's where all of a sudden they can get down there, but they usually, what you'll see is like a bounce because they have to recapture the tension in the pelvic floor to then spring them back up. All right, and that's what we're going to start to use with, we'll talk about in a second, with some of our narrows of how we get them to recapture some of that springiness that it looks like sometimes they're just falling to the floor all the time because there's nothing stopping it going down. All right, so in his case, what might be something we use right off the bat with him? I wouldn't go there first.
Okay. I would just some sort of breathing. You gotta realize.
Would we go supine, side lying, all fours, prone? We go side lying, right? Because we want to close off one space, so he's got to be able to expand the one side to the other. All right, so now we'll start talking a little bit about the turning, right? And I'm going to put on a quick clip because I don't do as good of a job talking about this stuff, but it's interesting.
Is some of the imaginary beginning point where we would say that, okay, the scapula resting in some sort of normal average position. We have got normal muscle activity, and then this would be a normal shape.
That top one
of the thorax.
is looking down,
We've got to initiate
shoulder blades are red,
turn
shoulders are the circles.
of compression and expansion. And so that's what the blue and the green arrows are indicating. So the heavier arrows are areas of compression. The smaller areas are areas of lesser compression. Because what we have to understand when we're talking about turns is that it's not necessarily one side of the body is moving forward, the other side is moving back. Actually, both sides are moving in the same direction, just at different rates. And so that's why the arrows are as such. Where you can see that both these blue arrows are pointing forward. So if I need to make a turn to the left as demonstrated in this middle part of the tendon, both sides of the body are actually going forward.
So what we're looking at is if I'm turning to the left. So Rob, come on up real quick.
So he's talking about like, in this case, it would be left foot planted, turning this way, not
Correct.
pivoting because
Correct.
he's saying both
Things
are
moving
like
forward,
opening like
right?
a door. Okay.
So again, I think that's one of the misconceptions we have in a lot of these things is that if I think about like rotation and some of these things, it's like, oh, I have to have one side moving forward and one moving backward, right? But in most cases, it's actually both sides are actually moving forward, and then you have one delaying a little bit to get out. And it was interesting. So one of our clients who's missing a couple things. He's missing like a sacrum and a kidney, and he's got a very interesting presentation that this space is like heavily compressed, right? And when I finally figured out this idea of the turning, and we got him to push down on his right side, sink this leg back, and then do this, it actually inflated. And I was like, holy crap, it actually looks like normal, like in terms of both sides look good. And what it finally realizes, on this back side, I need enough compression to start to turn and push. I still need compression on this left side, but it has to be a lot less so that it's just delayed a little bit so the right side can go in the front. I need a little compression on this left side to kind of hold me there, and then this right side has to yield, like the front just has to yield a little bit so it can go in front. All right, so what does that look like? Now I want you to go left foot on the ramp, right foot is going to be in front. All right, so I want you to take your right hand, you're just going to reach down like that. All right, and what I want you to do is just shift all your weight into this left leg. So that's a left turn. All right, you can see this is now much higher and more expanding. And if I got him to really breathe out on this left side, he would get the compression on the front side from his abs. Right, this would then have to expand. It has to. Right, and I'm going to so keep shifting into this left side. Right there. You feel this getting some weight.
Yep.
All right, how hard is this working?
How hard?
Yeah. How you feeling stretching back here?
Yeah.
All right. And what we can do then, good, you can relax, is we can bias some of our exercises towards some of these things that then will restore the ability for him to shift side to side because with a wide, because it's so compressed on like symmetrically on both sides, they can't do that very well. All right. So this whole idea of like, all right, well, how do we take some of our exercises now and put them into these positions? And it's like, all right, well, if I have a bent over cable fly and I have someone that maybe needs more, so in your case, right, he needs more IR on his right side, but it might be painful to his knee. All right, so maybe we bring him down and we push him this way and we turn him to the right and see if he can feel that without any discomfort. All right, or in some cases, because his left leg is already better, maybe we turn him to the left because he can actually tolerate that much better and we can restore some of the rotation back that way. All right, would you do symmetrical stuff or alternating, like unilateral? Alternating, because then I got to be able to get him to kind of let one side go and yield, which will give us one of those arrows on one side while the other one kind of overcomes it.
So even if he is like unilaterally, like
Compress. Yes.
you would still use, bilateral, one side, because it would help him gain that
Correct.
easier. better.
Correct. Yes. Right. It should allow us to restore some of our ability. So, like, in some cases, right, I don't want, like, if you were saying to me, I want to be a football lineman, I don't want him to turn. I want him to be like a block that just sits there, right? And in that case, like, yeah, we want him bilaterally compressed, and he's going to be hard to move. But if you said, all right, I want to be a little bit faster, I want to be able to turn quickly or run fast and stuff like that, I need those qualities back because remember when we were talking about the sideline shifting, as I take off, right, and I hit this, I've actually got everything turning towards this leg, which then puts all the force into the ground, and then I got to come back to the other side. If you can't, you then get like the, right, and that's where we see people bouncing from side to side as opposed to being able to turn and rotate. All right, and that's kind of like the thing that was very interesting is like once you see it, right, and this client, it was very easy because he had such a deficiency. And it was like, holy cow. You see these things all of a sudden start to materialize. And you're like, and he gets up and he's like, yeah, that just felt really good. And he ran on the woodway right after. He's like, no, I feel much looser. And you're like, oh. So now we got him to actually, and it's easy to see with him too because his right elbow doesn't come back. So it's always like, and then all of a sudden you could see this whole thing start to go back and forth. So that's where all of a sudden we can start to use these kind of ideas to be like, all right, I need to bias maybe some of my exercises towards this so that he can restore some of the stuff at the same time. Now, if I gave him a ton of weight, it's probably going to cause some interference because he's going to overly tighten up and compress again, especially if he can't breathe. Okay? So we've got this like turning idea in that, well, what measure do you think would be interesting to try to change with him quickly? Yeah. So he's got hip flexion, right? Yeah. Go feet up on the wedge and try a squat. So both feet there. Just go hands out in front and just squat down as deep as you can. You got any pain there?
Minimal, like a little bit in the
Okay. Good, come on back up. A lot in the knee?
Might need a shot, yeah.
All right. So what did it feel at a certain point?
More so on the way up. Holding down on the
Yeah,
spot.
yeah. You started to pressure. So if I need him, so like if we're looking at this and it's a pelvis, right? And again, I need some things to, especially for him, for a wide, I need things to yield and like relax a little bit. How might we do that? Like how do I take weight off of him to some degree if he's down in a squat? You could TRX him, right? You might do a TRX one. You could put a box underneath him and let him sit, right? And all of a sudden now he can just relax and sit into that and then push back up. So as he hits the box, things have to unload and then he can recapture it. So let's just try that and see if that makes any difference. Last one, I promise. I'm not gonna all of a sudden be like, all right, let's keep doing these until you limp out of here. All right, so all I want you to do is just going to go here, and you're just going to go all the way down. Give me a good exhale, and then come back up. What do you think? All right. Any different than before?
A lot less.
A lot less.
And a lot less labored.
Coming back up.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're trying again, so if he's a wide ISA, we want to restore some of these ER measures. A heel elevated spot is going to be like our first thing to go to. Let's go side lying first because I'm curious about this now. So lie on your side. All right. No, this is. So here's the thing: is like we never even did anything with breathing. All right. So maybe if we bring him here first, if we bring these knees up. Yep. All right. You can take your arm. I want you just to put it underneath your head. Can you do that without any shoulder discomfort? Yeah. Okay. So what I want you to do is think about just kind of tucking your ribs down a little bit. Right. So you're gonna give me like one of these. All right, and I want you to kind of be as like relaxed as you can. All right, and so now what I want you to do is just give me a nice breath in, and then blow it all out. Go again. One more. Do you guys see any movement coming backwards? Keep going. I'm going to give you a pad for your head. I want you just to kind of hold the ball like that. So think about like almost you're trying to like crush the ball into your chest, like into your sternum. Yep. Now give me an easy inhale. And nice, a full, smooth exhale. Yeah, just keep blowing all the air out. All right, remember, you get a good, just keep breathing. I know, and he held his breath. Okay. I know. I'm trying to get, what are you thinking?
Do it like this? Would that,
So you could. So here's what we're trying to do, right? I'm trying to give him something to push it on the front side, so he's got to go backwards, So we're getting some compression on the front side so he can push air back here. And you can see already like we're starting to spread out the sweatshirt a little bit. All right, in through the nose. Yeah, and then blow all the air out. Blow, there you go. Yeah, one more. Nice, man. How do those feel? I know. Yeah, good. So try one more squat and just tell me if it feels any different.
Have you tried to breathe into the sandbags at all?
Would he try that? You could. Yes, you could. Right? I could give him something to...
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that way he can't expand.
So, good. Yeah. What do you think?
Better, I mean.
Still there. Was the first one without any box was like what out of 10? 10 being like worst pain you've ever felt. 9.5. Second one was like what?
7.
And what was that one?
7.
Okay. So there's what's interesting though is I don't know if you guys saw it, but right when you go, watch out, grab my sweatshirt. Right when you had to set up, first thing he was like this, hung out here for a second, and then was like, and then came back up. All right. So what you got to be careful of is that sometimes when we put people in these positions, like we saw his back starting to expand a little bit. It looked actually pretty good. As soon as you put them up against gravity again, they may go right back into whatever they feel is like where they want to be. So something we might do is put them in a sideline position, maybe with a foot on the wall, and get them to do something along those lines too. All right, so now we can kind of talk about the foot and how we might bias that stuff. So we've got this idea of early, middle, late. All right, so we're looking at this kind of shin angle compared to this malleolus of the ankle. So I'll give you a quick one. So someone that stands kind of like this, it's probably going to be early. You see how the shin is kind of going back behind the ankle? Right, and then you may see someone a little bit more here. They're usually, from my understanding, they're usually biased a little bit towards one side. No one lives in mid-propulsion, right? You wouldn't move. You would just be stuck all the time. And then there's late. You see how the shin's kind of angling out in front? Right? So if I have someone here, we need to bring him back to early. If I have someone here, I probably need to get him to figure out how to get to late. All right, come stand right here. Let's just take a look and see where he's at. So hands out of the pocket, yeah, just like feet where you want them. Yeah. Anybody got a guess? I know. Take your shoes off. All right, so we got a pretty flat foot, right? It's not, you don't have a ton of arch. And then we've got feet that are kind of splayed out, which makes me think he's more of a late, right? So if he's late, ramp would be a good place to start for some stuff, right? So let's try this, right? Come on over here. If we want to recapture maybe some IR or something on that right hip, we might go into a left side lying propulsive position where he's going to push his left foot into the wall and his right knee is going to be up. All right? So what you're going to do is you're going to go like this. All right? And same thing, like I want you to pretend that med ball's there. So you're just going to kind of like almost hug it again. All right? Now what's cool is I can bias the foot position on the wall. So if I push it straight there, that's like mid. If I get him out here, that's like early. If I get him back here, that's like late. All right, so I'm going to put him a little bit in front and do that. And you're going to push a little bit here, and you're just going to keep this knee kind of up in that position and rib down. All right, so let's bring this guy up. Good. We're going to bring this guy out here, so get a little bit closer to the wall, just a little bit. Yep. So now straighten this leg out. There you go. Yeah. 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 There you go. And just going to turn this hip a little bit. Yep, and keep this leg straight. And what you might feel is some stuff working, like here. All right. Now give me a couple good breaths in through the nose. All right, keep feeling pressure on that foot into the wall. All right, and try to keep this leg straight. So the other thing too, right, is we may, yep, keep going. Yep, keep pushing into that left foot. Get one more breath there. Good. All right. We may, if we were trying to, so is this, in this hip, is he delaying it, or is he bringing it back, or is he bringing it forward? So he's still delayed, right? So in early propulsive, it's still delayed. This right leg is still in front, right? So he's still here, right? It's still a little delay here, and then as I come through, it's going to push me back to the other side, all right? Which, what we might think about is, how do I continue to maybe bring him back even further on this left side? I might now have him go, reach with your right arm out. Like really reach. All right, and now you can see this whole side is back behind, and now he's really kind of delaying that left side a ton, because I have to yield here if I'm reaching and compressing on that right side forward. This is the hard part. We used to think like that was going to give me the expansion on the back side. Kind of, right? We got him to do this, it got him to open up a little bit, but the more I push, it becomes a compressive force on the back side. And now if I have him really reach hard with that right arm, yep, and you're just going to kind of let this, and kind of just give me a little breath out, right? And what we then will see is this side is actually getting kind of the posterior expansion of the yielding action, right? Keep this foot, some pressure on there. Get 2 more breaths. And then you can put your shoes on, and I swear, last one.
So when you had him put his arm on, you tried to get this left side more into early?
Yielding. Yes. So think of it this way. Here's his right side on the floor, right? The left side is going backwards. I shouldn't say backwards. It's slowing down. So what happens is, as I do this, right, things are still going forward.
Right.
The only thing, though, is that this one is just slowing down enough so that the right can get out in front. That's the hard part. Is like he's not moving.
Well, right, but I'm just thinking, like, if you look at the body, like, this is late propulsion.
So you're going to go, as I hit and I push off, it's pushing me over to the other side. So as I bring this back, you see how everything's starting to turn back on this side? I haven't put any weight there. That's the early part. Then I get to mid, and then I really come across and then go the other direction.
Okay, so you're saying, like, before you even twist the body
Yes.
into, like,
So like if we think about like
so early propulsion, your body, your foot's still
you're still in
back.
this right side.
You're still,
So here's what we're doing. We're trying to delay his right side or his left side from coming forward so really quickly, right? Because for the most part, if I see someone that's got a ton of stuff on the right side, right shoulder, right knee, herniations, I'm kind of thinking he's always over here, right? So if I'm always getting pushed over to this side is always basically got this blue arrow pushing from the back, right? And it's just every time he steps, right, he's just kind of going back, coming back. And it's just kind of always drilling him back to the other side. So, no, but like,
it's all on videotape, so we'll be able to.
but what would be interesting though, right, is if you see, yeah. But so here's the thing is, that is the exaggerated thing, right? You will see a limp, and that's it. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at someone that is kind of, they can't get that side to come back and do it. So the hard thing is, like, in most general cases, it's hard to spot, right? We're pretty good at compensating. You can't kind of pick this stuff. But when you see it exaggerated, you're like, oh, I got it. It makes a ton of sense. And that's what I'm saying, is it was really hard to figure this stuff out until I had that one case where it's like, man, this thing is showing up really hard. And then you get it to change. You're like, I got it now. That kind of makes sense, right? So shoes back on, although who knows? Screw it. I would have said waited too long. Yeah, it probably waited too long. But let's quickly go into these pelvic floor things, right? So with him, right, we might start using a box squat, maybe even higher, so he's not necessarily putting a ton of torque on there, to get him to sit and then like yield and like let loose and then push back up. And again, the breathing might help us figure that out. The thing we can do with like someone that's a narrow, right? So we've all heard these or seen people or heard them like, anybody have somebody at box jumps and they're like super loud, or they run and it's like, right, and they're just all day on the floor. My assumption is that what you're seeing is the guts just dropping hard, right? There's nothing to put it back up. So how do you get them to start to spring up? You need them to stop abruptly, right? So all of a sudden we're getting them to stiff and tighten up. So we get them to catch, and then we can start to get them to spring it back up. There's two ways we've been doing this, doing some type of drop and catch, or we give them the assistance and we help them bounce, right? And that unloads them enough so it's not so heavy for them to fall through the floor that they can start to figure out, how do I maintain a little bit different position.
So, to piggyback off of that.
Yes.
Somebody's experiencing like shin splints. Could that be something to help?
Could be. So here's the other thing that I see it show up in. Like, we've all seen someone do a split squat like this. Right? Like, what the hell just happened? Like, is gravity much more like intense for you? And you'll see this too, right? They usually do this. And if they're pushing forward like that, what are they trying to get? If I do this like a hinge, what am I trying to get? Internal rotation, right? They're trying to find it so they can push back into the ground to go back up. All right, so you'll see them collapse, wait till they get internal rotation, that they can put force in the ground and come back up. And some people don't get it. So you get like that, and then they got to come back up. And they're like, yeah, my knee doesn't feel good when I do that. But I would doubt, that's not, like, I wouldn't assume that's him, because that dude's compressed as hell. He should actually be like, yep, that's as low as I go, right? Because he just doesn't have the range to get there. But that's kind of our starting point, is like, all right, where can we start to put some of these things in place? So like Brandon might be using a TRX to unload him a little bit. We might be using a band to give him some bounce. We might be using an actual weight to get him to stop abruptly if they know how to actually hit those positions. And then for like someone that's compressed, we put a box underneath them. They can sit. They can get one space to yield, so things will tone down a little bit. And then if they breathe, they can come back up. When you were going down, were you holding your breath? Yeah. Yes, you were, right? So immediately, he's forcing it. See, Noel? So if we can get a good exhale right off the bat and get him to slow down and then take a breath in as he goes down, we might have a better strategy when it comes to actually sitting to the box and then coming back up. Okay? See, a lot of stuff. Any thoughts or questions before we wrap it up? Go for it.
So you practice and try a whole bunch of different things with him.
Yes.
Obviously, we're not going to sit and spend 45 minutes and do just that with one of our clients.
Correct.
So how do you start sprinkling this into their workout that you're doing? Do you just
Awesome.
try something and go, that didn't work this time, we'll try something next time?
Yep.
Okay.
So,
Okay, but then, so to piggyback off of
Yeah,
that, like
yeah.
with his, he's a wide ISA, his knee hurts, he doesn't have good, IR.
at the hip.
Would you, if you're going to give him some sort of squat, maybe you don't give him a squat, but if you're going to give him a squat, do you widen his stance? Do you externally rotate? Do you give him that external rotation
Good question.
until you can fix the
So
problem?
go for it.
Just from my experience from working out and compensating for my knee pain and
Yeah.
stuff, I do go wider with my feet angled out.
Okay, but you didn't hear. That's why I was.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to mimic what
Okay.
you want me to do.
So,
Got it.
and here's the thing. Well, so here's a piece of it, right? Is we're going to use something to constantly use as our base, all right? I want someone to be able to demonstrate a squat where they can hold it without doing something like this or having to go there. He may never squat like that, right? Especially maybe never under load. So you're right. Maybe if he's like, man, I got to squat. Well, our option is to get wider, to give him some ER back, yeah, and then he can go and get it, right? It's going to come at a cost, right? It's going to turn more into a hinge. You have to, right? Because I can't get my knees forward and go all the way down. Like, that's as far as I get. So I have to, if I want to feel like I'm getting back, that's more of a deadlift, right? He's already wide. I'm already in that position. Are we going to recapture motion with that? I would probably say no, right? Unless it's like these easy breathing, sitting to a box and slowly coming back up, stuff like that. But that's where 100% like what Doug is saying and like what we're trying to figure out is like, all right, if I need to get somebody to still do this stuff, what are some of the options I can then
Like the
plug in?
balancing of we want to right?
Right.
We want to do corrective action, plus we also want, they need to get
Stronger.
stronger, fitter, whatever.
Correct.
Like she said, you can't spend all
Day.
day, you know.
So I would say this, right? First thing is always try something on the floor, all right? Because managing gravity is going to be pretty hard for someone that's missing something pretty distinct, all right? So as soon as you stand them up, you're going to force them to probably hold something that's already challenging. So that's why we started with just a side lying thing, all right? And it became pretty apparent his whole breath was just... So like if we were going to pick something maybe more... If I was actually thinking like, all right, I wanted to get that change more specific, I'd probably do the sideline. I'd probably go with some type of kneeling mini band, like upper back breathing. And then I would probably go with that sideline propulsion one, or maybe we would go with a prone cross connect, maybe. I don't know. It depends on how his knee feels. But the other thing, too, is I would also think about shifting him into his left as much as I can to start, to see if it helps alleviate the stuff on the right.
So you could do an all fours, all fours breathing for me under.
So you could, right? And here's the thing: is typically, this is, I guess, there's no reason why you couldn't. Typically, wides do a little bit better in a sideline position than in all fours, right? Typically, narrows are going to do better in a supine or all fours position. But who knows? Like that could work really well. You don't know until you try. It's like when you're asking, like, when do I do this stuff? Sometimes I'll just get like a little bit of like, oh, let's try this real quick, and then you have to have something that you check it against. So for him, it might just be quick, like, oh yeah, show me a squat again, and then he goes. So like right now, one of our guys is very, very compressed, very wide. I think we were talking about him last time. His toe touch was like here on the first day, back pain. Squat was like this, and had pain. We've gotten him to the past week where he's like almost there, right? But that's what we do after like every 2 exercises. I'm like, hey, just show me a toe touch real quick. And what you'll see is like what I just didn't give me anything back, didn't make it worse. Like, do I want to put more time into doing that exercise? I don't know. Like, did he like it? If he likes it, all right. If it makes him better, awesome. What else is in that vein that we can start to put in there? And I'll tell you what's actually been the best thing for him is put a wedge on his heels. He goes down to the squat to the box, breathes all the way, or inhales, breathes all the way out, rolls down, inhales, goes all the way back up, and then rolls up. And that got him to pretty much touch his toes almost. And he was like, oh, all right.
Now, is this with a personal training client, or is this one of the
Yes. So
how do you integrate this into like when you have multiple athletes going on at once?
So it goes back to that idea of our kids are pretty similar, right? So there's not, again, you're not going to really see it too much. You start to look at some of the outliers, and that's where all of a sudden I was like, ooh.
Right.
So here's,
they're either ER or
there you
IR.
go. So
and then you can
what's been much easier is to see our narrows, because these are the type of kids that we've actually started to use like a box squat with a stick on the back to get them to actually do what like Rob is doing on his own, like to do this and then come up, because we're getting their sacrum to counter-nutate. We're getting some compression on the backside, which is good for acceleration and being able to put force into the floor. And it's working. We started with a stick. We use like the body bar, and what's crazy is like if you ask those kids to show me a hinge, they go. And you're just like, what happened? Like it's like a candle melted. It just goes over. But now they can actually start to find that position. You're like, oh, I'm starting to get someone that can figure it out. So yeah. Good? Good. Excellent, guys.